Ways to protect your business before, during, and after a New York divorce. Section 1 covers legal considerations. The first question here is, what legal aspects should New York business owners consider during a divorce?
Yeah, I think a business owner would want to consider um, number one, their their partners. How big of a business do they have? So what considerations they have would vary with the size of the business. If they're a solo practitioner, if they're a partnership, if they're a small corporation, if they're a 1,000 employee corporation, all those considerations are going to be different. Um, Now, if they're an equity partner in a business, or they have a sizable percentage uh, ownership of a large corporation, considerations have to be, was the business started during the time of the marriage? If the answer to that question is yes, the spouse may have a share of that business ultimately as part of the divorce case. So, one thing that you would want to do if you have partners, or again, you're a small, large corporation with numerous employees, is perhaps having a meeting and just letting your partners or your co-officers of the corporation know what's going on, so that it doesn't come as a surprise later on. Oh, hey, now all of a sudden the wife is coming in, or or the husband, if it's a female owner of a corporation, um, asking for a share of that corporation. That share can come through shared stock. It can come through, possibly asking for a split of some kind of equity interests. Um, so all those things have to be considered. Um, Depending on the extent of the corporation, you may want to meet with a wealth protection advisor. There's many firms that are out there that will give specific advice in terms of wealth or asset protection. So you would certainly want to start meeting with that type of company, especially ones that have experience, advising people going through a divorce case. So the best questions you can ask that potential company that you're about to work with is, have you worked with people like me? How often? How long have you worked with people like me going through my situation? So you want to really delve into that. Your divorce attorney may or may not have the expertise to really recommend one firm versus the other. So sometimes that's really something that you have to research on your own, possibly consulting with other colleagues who may have gone through similar situations. You would want to also consult with your accountant, with your financial planner. If you don't have an accountant or financial planner, get one now. Those entities, especially if you're talking about a business or corporation that's generating many hundreds, millions, or tens of millions of dollars, if you don't have an accountant or a financial planner by now, you've been doing something wrong all these years, and you really need to get on board with that. Do not get thrown off by people that call themselves tax planners or tax preparation services. They are not accountants. The real question you have to ask yourself is, would I go to a non-doctor if I have a medical issue? Probably the answer is no. You would want to be seen by an actual doctor if you have a medical issue. Same thing with going through tax or financial planning issues, you want to make sure you're going to an actual accountant. You want to go to a certified divorce financial planner. And you want to go to a reputable wealth or assets management company. Um, as early as possible, you want to meet with a good divorce attorney. So similarly to how you would interview a wealth or asset protection company, you would want to go out there and research attorneys. So you want to make sure that the attorney has dealt with your situation in the past. Um, uh, Now, I get this question a lot with people. Oh, well, can you cite to prior cases or refer me to some of your prior clients that you've dealt with in this situation? The answer is no. It's because divorce cases are confidential. So no divorce attorney is going to be able to say, oh, let me refer you to Joe Bob, who was a prior client that went through the exact situation. Well, Joe Bob isn't going to want to speak to another potential client. They just went through a divorce case. If they're not, and it would even be awkward and somewhat a breach of attorney-client protection for an attorney to even go to a prior client and even solicit that type of quote unquote recommendation. Instead, where you would get recommendations from is either Google or Avvo, AVVO, where people post recommendations. And, sometimes you can glean from those recommendations whether the person, was a business owner or something along those lines. So you really want to get that legal advice as soon as possible. If you see a divorce coming, even if you think that the divorce isn't going to happen for months or years, and you just get the sense that maybe things are not right with your marriage, if you're thinking, hey, let me consult a marriage counselor, consult a divorce attorney as well. Doesn't hurt. I have people that consult me and then I don't hear from them for a year, 2 years, 5 years. But they got that advice at the beginning so that they know and can prepare themselves for potentials in terms of spousal maintenance, property, and asset distribution.
Great information right there. Very detailed answer. How does New York's equitable distribution law affect business assets?
Yeah. So New York business or divorce law affects businesses in that people really need to drink in the fact that generally speaking, a business either started during a marriage or has appreciated in active value during a marriage is a divisible asset. So a lot of people think, well, gee, my spouse had nothing to do with my business. I started it from the ground up and put in my blood, sweat, and tears, and he or she did absolutely nothing to help me with the business. Well, newsflash, they still get a cut of the business. And that business can be valued. And a price tag can be put on it, either a market resale value of the business or the net worth of the business can be distributed. So your spouse can get anywhere from 0% on up to 50%, in rare cases, even more than that, in terms of the value of the business. And how those businesses get valued is usually by a forensic accountant who would come in, take a look at the business, and put that price tag on that business. And that's all the more reason why you would want to be aware of that as early in the process as possible. So hopefully long before you've even thought that it's definite that a divorce is going to happen, you've already consulted the attorney, you've already consulted a financial planner, you've already consulted a wealth or asset protection company to put yourself in the best position possible so that, if you're thinking, oh, my spouse is going to get somewhere between 10 and 50% of a business that might have an equity value or market value in the hundreds of thousands, millions, or tens of millions of dollars, that's a lot of money, obviously. So you want to invest the time and resources now, as early in the process as possible, to put yourself in that best position to protect your business interests.
Right. And going back to what you said, can a business be considered marital property in New York?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's two principal ways, which is either it was started during the time of the marriage or it appreciated active value. So appreciation of active value means the business itself was started before the marriage, but so that the overall equity value is mostly quote unquote separate property. The active appreciation comes in where maybe the business was only worth $100,000 at the time of the marriage. And now, based on blood, sweat, and tears, you've built that business up and now it's $1 million business. Well, that's some of it is going to be just market forces. So, businesses will naturally go up in value over time, but some of it will also be that active appreciation, and that active appreciation is really your hard work. And I get a lot of business owners that say that just seems really, really unfair to me that I put in all my hard work and now my spouse gets the benefit of it. Well, that goes back to the concept of an economic partnership. When you say I do, you have formed an economic partnership. And as is the case with any business partnership, one partner could be out there putting in the blood, sweat, and tears and the hard work, and the other partner could be over there doing nothing with respect to the partnership or just doing other things. And when the partnership goes to get dissolved, that partner that quote unquote did nothing directly towards the partnership or business still gets a cut, whether one likes it or not. So divorce law borrows that concept from business law and plunks that idea or that concept down into divorce law and says your spouse, even if they just put in efforts as a spouse or a parent to your children, has an argument that they should get some cut of the value of that quote unquote active appreciation. And what differentiates active versus passive is ultimately up to a valuation that would be conducted by a forensic accountant. So they would step in, they would do kind of their best analysis as to what it was worth at the time of the marriage and what it was worth now. It becomes a difficult analysis to conduct if you started your business 30 years ago, you got married 20 years ago, and now you're getting divorced 20 years later. Records have a way of disappearing, and so it becomes somewhat difficult for that forensic accountant to step in and really put a definitive price tag on what that business is worth 20 years ago. But such is the state of the law, they're going to put in their best guess. And ultimately, if you can't settle that issue, that's going to be up to a judge to put in his or her best guess as to the overall quote unquote appreciation of that business during the time of the marriage and what constitutes active versus passive.
Great. And you mentioned the steps to valuation in forensic accounting. How exactly is a business valued during a New York divorce?
Yeah, usually that's where the forensic accountant will step in. They have a whole checklist of documents that they're going to ask the business to produce. So among other things, they're going to ask for the basics like tax returns. They're going to ask for various schedules, bank account records. But they're usually going to, depending on the state of the business, they're going to ask for a whole lot of other documents that has to do with, you know, whether the business has assets or not. So they're going to ask for um, an asset listing, and if any audits or appraisals have been done on the businesses, they're going to ask for financial statements if financial statements have been done. They're going to get into general ledgers if the business keeps general ledgers. Beyond that, they're going to ask for all employee information. So they're going to ask you to produce W-2s, 1099s, proof of payment of all that. They're going to ask for any debt documents. So if the business makes any loans, either to shareholders or to their own employees or contractors, they're going to ask for all that. If the business keeps any kind of sales tax records, cash receipt journals, things of that nature, they're going to ask for that. They're going to ask for documentation on accounts receivable, both out and in. So, in other words, people that owe the business money, but also, if the business owes anyone else money, they're going to ask for that. They're going to ask for a list of inventory. Like I said, they're also going to ask for that list of fixed assets. They're going to ask for a listing or schedule of your real estate investments, and whether any appraisals have been done. If not, they may ask that appraisals be done as part of their analysis. And that way they can factor that into their analysis. They're also usually, depending on the extent of the business, they're entitled to ask for various schedules showing what compensation is paid out to both employees, officers, partners, owners, etc. They can ask for documentation and records showing payouts of any benefits that are awarded to, again, employees, partners, officers, owners. So that can be many, many things, including but not limited to vehicle or meals, health insurance, pension, 401k plans, things of that nature. So they can ask for all of that. They're going to also ask if the business has been appraised or valuations have been done. They're going to ask for those reports, and certainly any kind of documentation of distributions to shareholders. They're gonna ask for that. So they would usually ask for the K1s, but also just the documentation that would back up the K1s. If there's any inkling that the business may be underperforming, usually the forensic accountant is going to ask them to produce their marketing and their advertising campaigns so that they can do a compare and contrast as to whether the business is maximizing its value. So very similarly to somebody that suppresses their own income, if they know they're going to get hit with a large spousal maintenance or child support assessment, a business owner could theoretically say, oh, hey, I see a divorce coming months or years away. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put on the brakes on the business and slow it down, so that when it comes time for a value, it's undervalued versus what the business can really do. And then when the divorce, documents are done, now I'm going to hit the gas pedal and it's full steam ahead. Well, a good forensic accountant may smell that and may say, hey, look, I want to see what you've done historically in terms of advertising and marketing and what you're doing now, to do a compare and contrast. Because if they see a downslope, they're going to want to explore why that is, especially if it's not consistent with the market. And that's where that forensic accountant would really have to know the market of your business. Because if the business is going downhill, but all other businesses in your field are also somewhat going downhill, well, then it's probably not anything to make hay about. But like I said, good forensic accountant and even a good divorce attorney are going to smell if something doesn't seem right between the numbers that you're producing and the overall market. So those are, among other things, the documentation that you would be asked to produce.
Right. And what are some of the potential financial consequences for business owners going through a divorce in New York?
Yeah. So among other things, again, you're looking at perhaps the obvious, just from a personal standpoint. If you have children, you're going to have to pay child support. If you have a spouse that may not earn in your ballpark, you may be assessed spousal maintenance. We've already discussed the possibility that the business itself may be valued and a value distributed. So, just on the surface level, those are some of the financial consequences. But here's some others, which is a lot of business owners, they may or may not see a divorce coming. And I know it may sound shocking to some people, but they mix and match personal expenses and business expenses. So what I mean by that is that I see this a lot with business owners where they pay, obviously, personal expenses out of the business account. So as examples, they'll pay their personal car, and just call it a commuting expense. Maybe they run their business out of their house, so then they just start paying all of their housing expenses out of the business account. So they'll pay their mortgage, they'll pay, all of their utilities or most of them, et cetera, out of the business account. And they're certainly playing with fire, because if they ever got audited, they would be screwed. Because any good accountant is going to tell you you can't do that. Even if you run a business out of your house, you can only deduct a certain percentage of your overall expenses. You can't deduct all of them. And a classic thing that I see is people deducting their car. So, just even, their lease or their finance payments, their gas, their maintenance of their car, and they'll just deduct like 100% of it. And no IRS auditor and no divorce judge is going to believe that you use your car 100% for a business, but then in your personal life, you just walk around the neighborhood or something. It's ludicrous. So you have to know that when you get a divorce, the other side is going to have presumably a good divorce attorney and or a forensic accountant, et cetera, that is going to go through your books with a fine-tooth comb and ask for all of the documentation of your business expenses. And so that's going to include, if you just have a Schedule C on your personal return, or you do a corporate return that has a schedule listing out all your business expenses. The other side and the forensic accountant, if one is involved, are going to want to see all of the receipts, bills, invoices, etc., that corroborate all of those business expenses. So, again, I face this all the time with people where they just don't have that documentation. And if you don't keep it, you're going to get screwed at an IRS audit, and you're going to get screwed in the divorce case itself. Bottom line. So if you haven't been keeping it and you see the divorce is coming either months or a year or two away, start keeping that documentation now, because if you don't, you're going to get screwed.
Good advice. How can divorce impact business cash flow and operations in New York?
I wouldn't necessarily say directly. I would say indirectly it may, such that, number one, a business owner is going to have their time and attention devoted to litigating the divorce case. But then if a forensic accountant gets involved, they may suck up resources of the business, because the business is going to have to start producing all this documentation to the forensic accountant. So one of the things, again, it all depends on the size of the business. But if you're talking about a multi-million-dollar business, or a business worth tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars, one of the things that I'm going to advise my clients, if there's a forensic accountant that's been appointed by the court to put a value on that business, one of the first things that you should do is hire your own forensic accountant, so that the two accountants can simply talk to each other, and your own forensic accountant can assist the business in preparing the documentation and corroboration that court-appointed neutral forensic accountant is going to need. The more help that you can get, other than just your divorce attorney, the better off you will be, and the less impact the divorce case itself will have on your cash flow and operations. But if you think all I need to do is just hire a good divorce attorney and he or she will just take care of everything, well, got news for you. We don't. We take care of what goes on in the courtroom, but we're not experts on financial matters, on tax matters, on valuation matters. We know of them, we take courses on them, but that's not what we do for a living. We do law for a living. So, at the earliest point you can, you want to assemble that team to help you. And so many people think cheap, and they'll try and do things in-house or try and do things themselves. That's what's going to start affecting cash flow and operations, is if you start thinking you can do that yourself. Hire that independent person, that team, to come in and assist you with the divorce case, and therefore assist your attorney. Because if you have your own forensic accountant, indeed, that forensic accountant can also help your own attorney, because what they're going to do is they're not only going to help produce that documentation and corroboration to the court-appointed neutral, but they can also point out to your own divorce attorney where they think there's flaws in either the methodology and or conclusions of the court-appointed neutral. So just things to think about in terms of that impact to cash flow or operations.
Well, that's an excellent answer. You talked about assembling a good team. For the final question here, what other steps can business owners take to protect their businesses before and during a divorce?
Yeah, I think that relates to the answer that I just gave, which is to really make sure to assemble that team at the earliest possible opportunity. Again, depending on the extent of the business. If if you're a solo practitioner and your business is generating $100,000 or $200,000 a year, you may not think in turn, and you may not have to assemble a whole big team. But if your business is worth millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions, that's where you have to start thinking, I need a team to help me beyond just my divorce attorney. I need a good accountant. I need a certified divorce financial planner. I need a wealth and asset protection company at my side. I need my own forensic accountant who is skilled in doing business valuations. So all those people can be referred by your attorney, or like I said, you can do research on your own to assemble that team. But you also want to meet with your attorney, because your attorney is going to know, here are all the things that I am going to need to assemble your case. So I have, just on my own, a list of approximately 30, 35 different categories of documents that a business would need to produce. Actually, check that. I'm looking at the list now. It's up to 40 different categories of documents that your business is going to need to produce to either your attorney, the other side, and or that court-appointed forensic. Knowing what that list is well in advance of your divorce case is going to put you in a better position, because you're going to be ahead of the game. And so things are not going to come as shocks. Very unfortunately, the divorce judges try to speed up the cases as much as possible, because they're getting pressures on them to close out divorce cases as fast as humanly possible. And oftentimes, if you're talking about 40 different categories of business documents, and that is aside from your individual documents that you have to produce in terms of financial documentation and corroboration, knowing what that list is as soon in the process as possible, so that you can start preparing all that, is going to be better for you. The good attorneys would have that list available in 2 seconds. So all you have to do is just set up a consultation with a good divorce attorney. Say, hey, I might be going through a divorce case in a few months or a year or two. I want to start preparing now. What do I do? And that divorce attorney should be able to tell you in about 30 seconds, here's the list of documentation that you're going to need. Here's the information that you're going to need. Here's the team that I recommend that you assemble now, and get going assembling that documentation. Even if that divorce, like I said, doesn't happen for a while, if you have that documentation all set up, then it's going to be a relatively stress-free process going through that divorce case.
Right. Very thorough answers.